morning, girls. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, miss.
How are you doing today, Shahid?
I'm doing well, alhamdulillah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good too. Let's wait for others to join. 8 attendees. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Miss. How are you?
Good morning. Hey, sweetie. How are you? Good morning. Okay, 9 attendees. All right, let's start recapping the session. Till then, the others will join. And do remind me to take the attendance at the end of the session. All right. Okay, we were doing the topic biological molecules, isn't it?
Yes.
All right, so let's quickly recap the contents. This is chapter 4. We started already last week. So let's start with a verse from the Quran which talks about the expansion of the universe, which we discussed already, that it has been stated in the Quran. Actually, there are many miracles which have been stated in the Quran already, which was revealed many centuries ago, though it was proved by the scientists today that yes, all those facts which were mentioned in the Quran were all true, subhanallah. So we need to put our trust in the book of Allah, which is the Quran. So the objectives for today's topic would be to explain the properties and functions of carbohydrates. So of course today we are going to study about carbohydrates in detail. Okay, again from chapter 4 we have 4.1, which is what are you made up of, which we did already last time. So today we'll be covering 4.2 inshallah, which would be carbohydrates. We are on textbook page number 41 today. All right, under the KWL, let me ask you a few questions regarding to the topic which we the contents which we covered last time. Okay, can you tell me? Yeah.
Can you invite Noreen?
Sure, sweetie. I guess I got the wrong spelling again. Which one? Which Norman is it? Is it Norman Shamin?
I think the first one.
All right. I invited her. Anybody else? Who needs an invite? 18 attendees so far. Is Norman in? Yeah, she joined. Okay. Okay, I will again download the attendance. Let us give them 5 more minutes. All right. So who's going to tell me what are the elements with which the various organic molecules are made up of?
Yes, can I?
Go ahead, sweetie.
The common in all is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen.
Yes, very good. So carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen are the atoms with which mostly all the organic molecules are made up of. So what are the 4 types of organic molecules which we are going to study in this topic?
Carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and water.
Yeah, of course, water, and also nucleic acids we are going to cover under this topic. So did we study about the sources of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats? We did, right? We also studied what is metabolism. So we just started studying about the topic carbohydrates, isn't it? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we discussed about the sources of the carbohydrates. So could someone please tell me what are the rich sources of carbohydrates from our diet? From where do we get carbohydrates? From the food we eat?
From the starch?
From the starch? From the starch? Yes, starches and sugars are carbohydrates, but what are the sources of the carbohydrates? From which type of foods we eat do we get the carbohydrates? It's written on the slide here.
Oh, Miss, you mean healthy and unhealthy foods? Like
Yeah,
bread, popcorn, and
both.
potatoes?
Yeah. So over here, even healthy foods are included, but we get mostly carbohydrate from the cereals we eat, right? As I showed you in this picture over here, all these are the sources of the carbohydrates. Okay, so all the cereals, like all these cereals, wheat, rice, barley, the starch present in the potatoes, the spaghetti, pasta, all it which is made up from wheat and the wheat flour. Of course, all the baked things which we eat, like the hoops, the cakes, the cookies, the bread, the pizza crust, all it is made up of wheat, right? And also we get most of the carbohydrates from the starch of the vegetables, like the tubers, potato, and the sweet potato, and also a little from the corn starch and all that. Okay, so these are the sources of the carbohydrates from which we get enough carbohydrates from the food we eat. Of course, there are the unhealthy sources also, like the carbonated drinks, like the cookies and all, which are very sweet, but they are also made up of carbohydrates itself. Okay, so the most common and the abundant forms are the sugars, the fibers, and the starches. So we discussed already in the last lesson as to what are fibers and what is a healthy plate in a balanced diet already, right? So carbohydrates, they contain the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and carbohydrates include the sugars and the starches which we eat. So we know the glucose, it is a simple sugar which is made in photosynthesis, which is used in respiration and transported in the blood, right? So this is the sugar molecule structure which you can see. What is the chemical formula of sugar, girls, of glucose?
C6H12 and O6.
Very good. It is C6H12O6, and this is how the structure of a sugar molecule looks like. Okay, so you can see 6 carbon atoms bonded to the hydrogen and oxygen atoms, and you can also see this ring over here, which is an oxygen atom and in one corner. Okay, so this is how sugar or the glucose molecule looks like. Now this is how a double sugar looks like. Okay, double sugar meaning it contains 2 molecules of sugar which are bonded together with the help of chemical bonds known as glycosidic bond. Can you see a bond forming between the 2 sugar molecules over here? Okay, so this bond is known as a glycosidic bond, and whenever in a sugar there are 2 sugar molecules present, such type of a sugar is known as a double sugar or a disaccharide. Disaccharide meaning containing 2 sugar molecules. So the complex carbohydrates are made by joining many sugar molecules together by chemical bonds. Now you're going to study now again about the classification of carbohydrates as to what are mono, what are di, and what are polysaccharides. Okay, so in this picture you can see this is starch, the starch which you get from rice, from potatoes and everything. So this starch is basically a polysaccharide. Poly meaning this is how the structure of the polysaccharide looks like. It has many glucose molecules which are linked together in the form of a long chain. Okay, as in its structure you can see more than 2 glucose molecules, meaning there are many. There may be 5, 6, 10, 15, many glucose molecules which are bonded together by the glucosidic bonds. So such a type of a structure in which there are many glucose molecules, it is known as a polysaccharide. Poly meaning many. Okay, so this starch which you see, it is a polysaccharide, and we all know the plants, they store starch as an energy store in their body, right? So they store the excess energy of the glucose in the form of starch, which can be easily converted to glucose, and the glucose can be converted to starch when they don't want it and they want to store it for future. And they also have enzymes to catalyze the reactions that join the glucose together into long chains like this. Okay, so again, clearly I will tell you what are mono, di, and polysaccharides now in this presentation itself. Here on the screen you can see this is a glycogen. What is glycogen, girls?
They're found in animal cells.
What is it actually?
It's almost like starch in a way.
Very good. Excellent. So how the same function of the starch in plants is played by glycogen in animals and humans, meaning the excess energy we store in the body in the form of glycogen in our liver and muscle cells. Okay, so this glycogen is actually a carbohydrate which can be broken down to produce energy when we need it. Okay, and this glycogen is also a polysaccharide, meaning it contains many glucose molecules joined together in the form of a long chain. Can you see? This is how the structure of a glycogen molecule looks like. Okay, so glycogen, sometimes called animal starch, is another complex carbohydrate made from glucose by animals as a store of energy. It is stored in our liver and our muscles, and both starch and glycogen, unlike the sugars, they are bitter in taste, they are not sweet in taste, and they are also insoluble in water. Okay? So only the glucose and the fructose and lactose, which are the monosaccharides, and also the the disaccharides like the sucrose, they are soluble in water but not the polysaccharides. Okay, so this is about glycogen, and here you can see cellulose. Yes, go ahead, sweetie.
What is the difference between sugars and starch? Or it's the same?
No, both of them are carbohydrates. That is the only resemblance. But sugars, they are the simple sugars, meaning the simplest unit of carbohydrates is the sugars, meaning the glucose in our body, which can be readily absorbed by the blood, and also the fructose, which is present in the fruits. All these are the simple sugars. Whereas starch, it is also a carbohydrate, but it is a polysaccharide, meaning a complex carbohydrate. Okay, so starch, you can say it is an energy reserve in the plants, and also we get starch from the carbohydrates we eat. Even that is a carbohydrate, but it is a complex carbohydrate. Clear the difference between glucose and starch?
Yeah.
Yeah, so both are carbohydrates, but that is simple, easily soluble, easily broken down, whereas starch is a complex carbohydrate, but is a polysaccharide. I will tell you now again, I will show you clearly. So this on the screen which you see right now, it is cellulose. Where have you heard the term cellulose?
It's what what the cell membrane is made of, I think.
Cell membrane.
Or the cell wall.
Cell wall, excellent. The cell wall in plants we studied when we were doing the organelles. It is made up of a complex polysaccharide known as cellulose. Yeah. So this cellulose, which gives the plants its strength and rigidity, is also a carbohydrate. It is a complex carbohydrate known as polysaccharide. So this is how the structure of a cellulose looks like. It is also made up of many glucose molecules which are linked together in the form of a chain like this. And this is how the cellulose actually looks like. The microscopic view of the cellulose is this. It contains many fibers crisscross like this, giving the plant cells a very rigid shape and also the structure. Okay, so cellulose is a complex structural carbohydrate made up of thousands of glucose units. Thousands, remember. So the glucose units are held together by bonds like this, forming long and unbranched chains. Okay, so in the cellulose, the glucose molecules, they form unbranched chains, meaning they are straight chains like this, unlike the glycogen and the starch. In starch, can you see the branched chains as well? So the glucose molecules, they form branched chains in the starch, though even this is a polysaccharide. Over here also you can see the branched chains, but in a cellulose they form the long unbranched chains. And these cellulose molecules are linked together to form fibers which give plant cell walls their strength and rigidity like this. Okay. Now coming to the classification of of the carbohydrates, they are classified into monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Okay, mono meaning one. So monosaccharides, they contain a single sugar unit. As you can see, only one sugar molecule or one sugar unit is present in monosaccharides like this. This is the structure of a monosaccharide like this. Can you see on the screen? A single sugar molecule. Okay, so these are the simplest sugars. The examples of monosaccharides are glucose, fructose, which is present in fruits, and galactose, which is the milk sugar, which is present in milk. Okay, so these glucose, fructose, and galactose are the simplest of the sugars, and they are the examples of monosaccharides. Now coming to the disaccharides, as you can see in this picture over here, they contain two sugar molecules instead. Meaning, as we just studied here in a double sugar, this is how it looks like. So this is a sucrose, which is an example of a double sugar, meaning it is a disaccharide. Di meaning two sugar molecules which are linked together with the help of glucosidic bonds. It is known as a disaccharide, like this. This is the structure of a disaccharide. Okay, the examples of disaccharides are maltose, which is malt sugar present in the malt, barley, and the sucrose. Sucrose is the table sugar which you use in your day-to-day life, like the sugar which you use in coffee, tea, and the various beverages and the desserts which you make is the sucrose. And the lactose is also a disaccharide. Okay, so these maltose, sucrose, and lactose are the examples of disaccharides, meaning two sugar molecules. Now moving on to polysaccharides. Polysaccharides meaning many sugar molecules which are linked together in the form of long chains. Okay, so as we just now studied, cellulose, glycogen, starch, all these are examples of polysaccharides in which you can see many sugar molecules which are linked together in the form of long chains. So as there are many sugar molecules, it is known as a polysaccharide. Examples: starch, glycogen, and glucose. This is how the structure of a polysaccharide looks like. Clear? You also have oligosaccharide over here, meaning 4 sugar molecules, and trisaccharides meaning 3 sugar molecules, but there are not many examples of oligo and trisaccharides in the book we study. So you have to only remember monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Clear, ladies? So let me again summarize. Sugars with a single carbon ring are called monosaccharides, example glucose and fructose. Those sugars with 2 carbon rings in their molecules are called disaccharides, examples maltose, sucrose, and lactose. And mono and disaccharides both are readily soluble in water and both are almost sweet in taste. Whereas these polysaccharides, they are insoluble in water and they are not sweet in taste. And when many glucose molecules are joined together, this carbohydrate, it is known as a polysaccharide. Clear, ladies?
Yes, miss.
Yes, miss.
Any questions about the classification of carbohydrates?
No.
Is it clear? Okay, so you need to memorize the examples of monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides, and you need to know what are they, because they will be again and again used in your biology, these terms. Alright, now coming to the functions of carbohydrates, as this person is telling you, pointing at you, that respiration is not breathing. So do you know the difference between respiration is not breathing? What is the difference between breathing and respiration? Who's going to tell me?
Can I answer, Miss?
Go ahead, sweetie.
Respiration is the release of energy from the cells, and breathing is the process of inhaling and exhaling oxygen and carbon dioxide.
Excellent. Very well said, Shahid. Yes, breathing is only the exchange of gases, whereas respiration, it is a metabolic process which involves the release of energy from the glucose. So the equation which you see over here, which says glucose plus oxygen gives rise to carbon dioxide plus water plus energy, the ATP which is released, it is the byproduct of respiration. Okay, so both respiration and breathing are not one and the same, they are different. So all organisms, they respire. It is the production of ATP from organic molecules, And aerobic respiration, it requires oxygen because this is where the ventilation and gas exchange comes in. So aerobic respiration is the respiration where oxygen is taken in or oxygen is involved, and whenever oxygen is taken in, only then the glucose can be broken down into carbon dioxide and energy is released. Great. So what are the functions of carbohydrates in our body? What do carbohydrates give us?
Energy.
Energy, excellent. They give us energy. So 1 gram of carbohydrate, it releases 17 kilojoules of energy. So you need to correct this. It is not 171 over here. It is 17. Okay, so kilojoules is the unit with which the energy is measured. So 1 gram of carbohydrates, it yields about 17 kilojoules of energy. Okay, so you get maximum energy from 1 gram of carbohydrates and also from fats. Okay, whereas proteins does not yield that much of energy. So the main function of carbohydrates in your body is providing you with energy. The energy which is released by respiration, and the carbohydrate that is normally used in respiration is the glucose. The glucose is the simplest form into which the carbohydrates are broken down so that the glucose can be readily absorbed into our blood. Also, the cells use the glucose to release the energy that they need to carry out the processes of life. Okay, ladies, so this is about the carbohydrates. Before we move on to proteins, do you have any questions about carbohydrates so far? Is it clear? Any questions? So let me also read out from the textbook, page number 41 about carbohydrates so that we don't leave out on any information. So let us go through the information we have in our textbook now. So please open page number 41. It is just a summary of what we did right now. Carbohydrates include starches and sugars. Their molecules contain 3 kinds of atoms, which are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And a carbohydrate molecule has about twice as many hydrogen atoms as carbon and oxygen. You can see that in C6H12O6. So what are sugars? The simplest kind of carbohydrates are the simple sugars or monosaccharides, like our glucose and fructose and galactose. So glucose is a simple sugar. A glucose molecule is made up of 6 carbon atoms joined in a ring with the hydrogen and oxygen atoms pointing out to form into a ring, as you can see in this in your textbook. So a glucose molecule contains 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms, and 6 oxygen atoms again, C6H12O6. To show this, its molecular formula can be written as C6H12O6, and this formula stands for 1 molecule of this simple sugar and tells you which atoms it contains and how many of each kind it contains. So although they contain many atoms, simple sugar molecules are very small and they are soluble in water and they taste sweet. As I told you, this glucose, fructose and galactose, all of them, they are simple sugar molecules, meaning they are monosaccharides and they are soluble in water and they are sweet in taste. Now, moving on to disaccharides. If 2 simple sugar molecules join together, a larger molecule called a complex sugar or a disaccharide is made. And 2 examples of complex sugars are the sucrose, the sugar which we use in our hot drinks or breakfast cereal or beverages, for example, and maltose, which is malt sugar. Which is the other example of disaccharide which I gave you from the presentation, apart from sucrose and maltose?
Lactose.
Lactose, excellent. And they are soluble in water. Even disaccharides are soluble in water and they also taste sweet. Now moving on to polysaccharides. If many simple sugars join together, a very large molecule called a polysaccharide is made. Some polysaccharide molecules that contain thousands of sugar molecules join together in a long chain. So the cellulose of plant cell walls is a polysaccharide, and so is starch, which is often found inside plant cells. And also animal cells often contain a polysaccharide called glycogen. So most polysaccharides are insoluble in water and they are not sweet. Clear about polysaccharides? Now coming to the functions of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are needed for energy in your body. 1 gram of carbohydrate, they release 17 kilojoules of energy, and the energy is released by respiration. The carbohydrates that is normally used in respiration is glucose. This is also the form in which carbohydrate is transported around an animal's body. And the human blood plasma contains dissolved glucose being transported to all the cells. The cells then use this glucose to release the energy that they need to carry out the processes of life. Now, plants also use glucose in respiration to provide them with energy. However, they do not transport glucose around their bodies as we do and animals do. Instead, what do? They transport sucrose, now sucrose which is a disaccharide, and the cells they change the sucrose to glucose when they want to use it. Okay, so they either store the glucose in the body in the form of sucrose or in the form of starch. Now, plants store carbohydrates as starch. It is quick and easy to change glucose into starch or starch into glucose. And some plants, they store large quantities of starch in their seeds or tubers, and we use these for food. What are the examples of tubers which we eat? Ladies? What are the examples of tubers which we eat?
Miss, what is meant by tubers?
Tuber is a vegetable, sweetie. So this you see in this picture, yeah, so these are known as tubers. Tubers meaning they are the root vegetables which grow under the soil. Okay?
Carrots?
Carrot, no, potato and sweet potato, which are known as yams, they are the examples of the tubers which contain starch in them. Okay, not the carrot. Though carrot is also a root vegetable, but it is not rich in starch. Okay, only the tubers like the potatoes and the sweet potatoes are very rich in starch, and they are a source of carbohydrate which we include in our diet. And also the various cereals which we include are the rich sources of carbohydrates. Now, animals, they do not store starch. Instead, they store carbohydrates in the form of polysaccharides, polysaccharide glycogen. However, only small quantities of glycogen can be stored. It is mostly stored in the cells and the liver and also in our muscles. So the polysaccharide cellulose is used to make the crisscrossing fibers from which plant cell walls are constructed, which is cellulose. And cellulose fibers are very strong, so the cell walls help to maintain the shape of the plant cell. Clear about the carbohydrates, ladies? Any questions?
I just wanted to ask you a question. So glucose is a polysaccharide?
No, sweetie, glucose is a monosaccharide. Glucose, it contains a single sugar unit. As you can see here, it is an example of a monosaccharide. The examples of polysaccharides are starch, glycogen, and cellulose.
So
Clear?
glucose can be converted to polysaccharide?
Yes, the many glucose units, when they come together to form long chains, then the polysaccharide is formed. Okay, for example, starch, it consists of glucose linked together into many chains, as we saw the structure of the starch molecule. This is how it looks like. Okay, so it contains glucose, but it is linked together. Many glucose molecules are linked together with the help of glycosidic bonds to form starch. Clear?
It's clear.
Any more questions?
No, thank you.
All of you? Ladies, any questions? Is it clear? Yes or no?
Miss, everything's clear.
Thank you so much. So now let's study about the food tests. Have you seen the testing for carbohydrates, which is in your textbook on page number 42? So this is how we test whether the carbohydrates are present in the particular food or no. You will also be doing these experiments in the lab in your grade 10 and 11, inshallah. We will be taking you to the labs in order to do this food test. So let me teach you from this presentation on food testing as to how do we do this food testing in order to check if the glucose and starch is present in the foods or no. Okay, I have uploaded this presentation on food testing also on your Teams. You may check it. Now, if you could look into your page number 42, you can see a picture in which you can see two test tubes which are immersed into two beakers. Can you see that? Now, the positive result of the Benedict test, which is the Benedict test is the test we do in order to check if the starch is present in the